Hello and welcome to this episode of Inclusive Urban Futures. Today, we will speak about inclusive growth with OECD's Sena Segbedzi, who is Champion Mayors for Inclusive Growth Coordinator. Champion Mayors for Inclusive Growth is an important initiative of the OECD that brings together mayors around the world who are committed to inclusive growth. So join us, listen, and share. Welcome to this episode of Inclusive Urban Futures. My name is Orna Rosenfeld, and I am absolutely delighted to welcome OECD's Sena Segbedzi to this episode. We'll talk about inclusion from her perspective as a coordinator of the Mayor's Platform for Inclusive Growth. Can you correct me on that? What is the exact title of the network?
It's a Champion Mayors for Inclusive Growth initiative at the OECD. We love long titles at the OECD.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yes. So I just wanted to start off by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself and what is it that you're responsible for.
Mm-hmm. So sure. I am, I guess by training, an urban planner. I'm from the US and studied urban planning in the US, but had always been interested in more of the international development aspect of it, because originally my parents are from Ghana. I've lived there a little bit and I've lived in different cities throughout the US, so experienced how urban agglomerations can really, really differ. And so, I'm an urban planner. Right now, I'm working at the OECD's Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions, and Cities. And within that, I manage this network of mayors at the OECD. And it's really a network of local leaders who are committed to advancing inclusive growth. And by that, we mean putting forward policies around their economic development and social inclusion, social cohesion policies in cities to help lift people out of poverty, expand access to opportunities, and create the workforce, environmental safety, material life conditions for people to succeed and survive. So that's basically, it's a coalition of the willing, as we like to say, and it's a network of mayors, not cities. So that's a little bit different from how other city networks are organized. We're really looking at the leader and really following kind of the power of leadership in moving an inclusive growth agenda in cities and what it takes. So that's basically what I do on the day-to-day, run this network.
Yeah. Yes, and what really what led you and what inspired you to join this network and to lead it, to coordinate it?
Yeah, so I've been working on the topic of equitable development, equity in cities for almost 10 years now. First in the US with the Ford Foundation, and they had a program that was called Metropolitan Opportunity. And that's where I started out my career, working in 10 different cities in the US that had different kind of market. There were on all aspects of the market, some strong markets, some medium markets, and some little bit hard hit markets like the Detroits of the world. And throughout all, we were looking at this question on who do we need to bring around the table? The civil society, the banks, the philanthropic organizations, the developers. Who do we need to bring about the table to develop the city in ways that bring more people into the fold? And I really like the subject matter. I felt really connected to trying to build cities in ways that were friendlier to people at from all different backgrounds. I come from a migrant, like my parents are immigrants to the U.S., and I'm now, an immigrant to France. So I feel this inclusion, like making friendlier cities, making cities that care, making cities that are inclusive. I've lived it, so I'm trying to advance that, and have always worked along these lines in urban development. And so that's what attracted me to, of course, the champion mayors, working closely with leadership in cities that are committed, but also constrained. But what can you do even in these situations? And they're doing a lot, and they're trying to move policies in interesting ways, and trying to bring people around the table in interesting ways, and trying to deal with the fiscal constraints of it all, and ways that are what we want to celebrate. And I think, given the COVID-19, there was a point in time where I felt that this the word inclusion was becoming like music, like
That's
right?
correct. Exactly.
It was
Yeah.
just something people said at every conference, and people. It was all around us, or at least the concept of it. But people were starting to not ignore it, but it was starting to be not as potent as it was when we're talking about the gaps in cities between rich and poor, let's say 8 years ago. And with COVID-19, I think this has sprung up resurgence in this, and really brought into focus that we all need to care. It's a group assignment to get cities right. So there's now, I was getting a little bit, not disheartened, but a little bit concerned that people weren't paying attention because of the climate change, because of digital, because of all the things that are happening in cities and we need to care about. But there's certainly been it's been highlighted, to say the least, of that we need to get this. We need to tackle inequality in cities. So that's what brought me to this topic.
That's incredible. And I thought, I was just taken by two things that you said. First of all, you said I lived it, and I think that this initiative is around really engineering inclusion and speaking with people who lived it, and engineered their own inclusion, and then they dedicated their lives and their careers to including others. So I am incredibly honored that you accepted my invitation, because this is what it is about. And I think that still in policy we're missing this bit of people who lived it, and people who are not only lived it, they are doing it now based on their professional experience, but also from what they done. So I just wanted to ask you, what does inclusion mean according to you? You said that it was, and we know that it was used everywhere. So
Right.
what does inclusion mean according to you, your interpretation of the term?
So I think it's a range of things, and I think it's a range of things for different people. So there's the economic inclusion angle, being able to find and secure gainful employment, being able to do it without the barriers because of your, race, or because of your gender, or because of your sexual preference, or because of, your age, and things like
Religion.
that, your religion, exactly. And so there is having the ability to access the jobs that you want and that you are qualified for, and to be able to have that in a city. So that's one aspect, and a lot of people have there's a lot of attachment with cities and the kind of economic development of also the city, but also the person. So having that relationship to your city. But cities are also made up of, different communities, different people, different areas and ways of using land and ways of being. And so I like how the OECD, there wasn't when I was working in philanthropy, there were, everyone had their different aspects of it, and we brought many stakeholders to the table, and it was hard to nail down what we meant by inclusion. It felt intangible. It's like you know it when you feel it, especially when you visit a city. If you see a diverse set of people, enjoying lunch together in a park, you feel a certain way versus if you see, a neighborhood that's falling to pieces and it looks like only one type of community is living there, you understand that context a little bit, and that there's something amiss there, or pockets of poverty or pockets of violence. So there is a sense of like the city belongs to everyone. There's an integrated approach. People congregate not just because of their economic means or their social background, but because of they like the park in the city, or they like it's the aspects of the city that bring people together, not the background and or prejudice or biases of people. So I feel like that there's a sense of that in a city. But what we work along in the OECD is on four factors. It's on building an inclusive education system as far as the city can do it. And we know a lot of cities don't have the jurisdiction of education, but a lot do work around early childhood development and lifelong learning practices. So vocational schools and vocational training. And so expanding access to that physically and also fiscally for people. The second is a labor market that's open to women, to youth. Now we're talking a lot about how youth have been impacted by COVID and by this economic downturn, and what it looks like when they can't get the training and the on-the-job experience that was once available to previous generations. What's that's going to look like for us, who are going to depend on the future workers, and for them who are not, fulfilled or satisfied with, either the studies that they've done to get them to this point in their job, in their career search, or just to not be activated. So there's that sense, but also we've done a lot of work on the that entrepreneurship needs to look like the people that live in the city. It can't be all a certain type of gender or race. And how do we make that more open? Because we know there are a lot of migrants who have an entrepreneurial spirit just by being and by moving to another country,
Exactly.
right?
And oh my goodness, we don't talk about
We don't
that. I
talk
mean,
about it. Yeah.
that is something that is missing. I will just before I
Yes.
get too excited about that, I will just let you finish the floor.
And actually, if we have an anecdote, I saw, I was in Wolf last week and we saw the mayor of Palermo, and they're receiving a few Ukrainian refugees or displaced people from the war. And he was saying, actually, when they first went through their wave of migrant immigration in like 2015, it was a lot of the migrant entrepreneurship community that were willing to give jobs and embrace newcomers in the city and do the training because they had been there. So, we talk about this, people wanting to give back because they've lived it. So there's the labor market aspect, which of course brings a lot of people to cities and also brings a lot of people of different means. We have what we call high skilled, people who earn a lot and high income earners, but we also have people on the lower end of the economic spectrum coming into cities, and they start to separate and the gaps start to widen, and the bigger the city, the bigger the gaps. So how do we start to close that so that both you don't stay a generation or two generations in poverty? So we work along that lines, and then of course housing has been a big topic of discussion. as we see that more people are spending more of their income on housing. And how do we create, I mean, and every city across the OECD, I'd wager even beyond the OECD has been struggling in providing kind of long-term sustainable housing to people
Mm.
and determining what affordability is. I know I've struggled with that myself. I mean, a lot of
Well,
right.
I can help you with that if you
Okay,
want,
sure,
but
sure, yes.
let's do it
I
in
know you
another
have.
conversation because that's a full thing, to
Right.
kind of interpret it. What does it mean for a city, and how can they could do it? But yeah, but that's for another episode, I would
Right.
think. Just let's yeah,
So there's a
yeah.
housing aspect, and then there's a resource services and infrastructure, and how transportation's built, and where it takes people, and from where they live to where they work, and how many jobs are along the transit line that people can access. So around those four, we've been able to build this work, and it makes sense to me. And it's also things that you can that you can move a little bit on as a mayor, and show improvements and do projects and policies. But you notice I didn't say climate change, which we know has had a big impact on displacing people, and also impacting social safety nets, um, disproportionately touching low income people in places like New Orleans and Puerto Rico. So we know that that is a factor in causing inequality in cities, or at least exacerbating it, and that can turn into this vicious cycle where structural inequalities are exacerbated because of this, addition of a climate hazard. And now, of course, in the post-COVID or the aftermath of COVID, we're now with the heavy reliance on digital services and digital and broadband, and access to the internet and technology, that hopefully, and we hope to spare our inequalities that are happening in analog become digitalized, and they're faster and deeper and all encompassing. I mean, do you
Yes.
remember going into a store and asking for a job application, and then like filling it in and then hoping someone, and that's not like possible anymore. You need a computer even for
That's true. And I
right.
think that for migrants, immigrants,
Mhm.
I think that the language, what I found when we were working on housing, basically migrants, what came up very much was actually a language issue, because
Mhm.
you have maybe sometimes there aren't opportunities and things are closed down, and that's another matter. But sometimes there are opportunities, there are facilities, there are services, and people just can't reach them because they don't master the language,
Mhm.
or they just simply don't know where to look for them.
Right.
But if somebody cannot fill in the application online, or does it incorrectly in that language, the only communication will be the written language, and that can be a segregation matter in
Yes.
itself,
Yeah.
because sometimes sometimes the personality actually can overcome the language barrier. But what I liked about what you were saying, and I think that you started with that, you started with actually access to work, and everybody being able to access the opportunity of work. But I
Mhm.
would I would just like to kind of dig a little bit more into it, because I mean, I think that the first question that comes to mind is that, to what extent, if you and within your network, whether do you actually address these kind of political assumptions of minorities, migrants taking jobs. And I think that what you were insinuating there, in partially, that basically if you have somebody with entrepreneurial spirit,
Mhm.
and um, then maybe they can provide jobs as well. It's
Mhm.
not really just taking,
Right.
and need for social care. It is also actually providing. So
Right. And I think, well, so we found, I think in this now we've been working a little bit on, and we have a section of the center that I work at that works on migrant integration and reception, migrant and refugee integration and reception. So we've worked with them in particular in a project in Stockholm, because the city of Stockholm was noticing gaps in unemployment between their male migrants versus their women migrants. Like, of course, there was higher unemployment in migrants, period. But in the group of migrants, males had, well, women migrants were more unemployed or had higher numbers of unemployment. And they wanted to figure out how to integrate those job seekers that into the local economic development. Now, in the case of Stockholm, they had jobs that need to be filled. They were actually struggling, especially in the restaurant industry, in the education and in the education field to fill in staff. And so they've done a lot of like vocational training for newcomers with children. They had a lot of language acquisition and like following the child through their language acquisition. And so they were trying to also think in the future, these are future employees, this is the future workforce, and they were investing in that way. But for the older migrants, there wasn't the sentiment of taking jobs um, from
Native
the
population.
native population, but more about how do we get people skilled up to fill. So that's in a great case, right? There's a lot of jobs and they need to fill. Now, I mean, there are a lot of places that are struggling through an economic downturn, or industries have changed, and what does that look like for them? I think we'll see this in the kind of the surge of folks exiting Ukraine into neighboring cities. What it looks like for the schools to absorb these new. I mean, there are kind of school worth amounts of children,
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
500 moving into cities, and how do you absorb a whole school into your city when you can't build a school in no time? And so I think in the beginning, there's of course solidarity, and we'll have to see in the medium term. And that's, I think, what we have to start working at now, to build the runway so that we can absorb the workers, we can create opportunities so that they may be entrepreneurs where they came from, or have that sensibility. And if you provide the resources, not only like how to open a business, but also the financial and the um, uh, the mentorship to navigate the system. And a lot of cities have been working on that to create these mentorship programs linking women entrepreneurs with women, seasoned entrepreneurs, with people that are interested in this space, especially in Japan, where they're trying to figure out the low birth rate, and also women exiting the workforce once they have children, how to build a workforce that's friendlier to the female population.
Yeah.
So there's stuff going on, but it's anecdotal. I'd like to see, if we can gather up and see what it actually in turn, does it make a place more inclusive? Does it make a place more economically vibrant if you actually do put measures in place to integrate them economically? But of course, there's going to be tensions with people feeling some sort of way, when people come. That's the human nature. But if you put the measures in place, and also using the institutions around you, a lot of cities have used the universities to like spread and develop to foster diversity, and to foster this welcoming in communities. And I've seen it work. Not parades, but things in parks and music, and making it more festive of having new people in your house. So
um, two things that I wanted to kind of follow up on, and you were basically saying that some of the evidence is anecdotal, and then I was just thinking about continuity as well when you started to
mhm,
speak about elected mayors, right? Elected
mhm,
politicians, because obviously they're not there for life. There are some of
right,
them are there for 4 years, some of them for 8.
right.
Um, so so how does I mean uh, how do we I mean maybe how do you from your perspective
Mhm,
um, tackle those issues of the challenge of actually doing this continually
yes.
over different through
Yeah,
different political
administrations.
parties
Yeah.
or administrations.
Yes, that's really one part of the work that's hard in our case. There are networks that follow cities, and so the continuity is there, or they plant people within the city, chief resiliency officers or things like that to help form the network of, 100 resilient cities and things like that. But when you're following the political leadership, I would have to say that one part of our policy pillars, which is the infrastructure, it can run through 3 administrations, building a metro line or building bus rapid transit. It can take a really long time and can, of course, surpass the administration that starts it and that gets it approved, and then the one that finishes it. We have had good luck in having, especially where, in some places that we work, the mayors are limited to 1 term. So it's just like you get the 4 or 5 years with the mayor, and that's it. Sometimes, in the best cases, the person that's coming next takes on and builds from there as far as the inclusive growth agenda for the network. We also work not only with the mayor, but we liaise with someone from the office that's a little more stable, kind of a civil servant, um, and that's always been great to have as a transition. So once the mayor leaves, they'll let us know this new mayor actually is running on similar platform or has similar ideas about how the city should grow. We'd like to include them in the network, and we do our background research to make sure that they're keeping to kind of the essence and the mission of the initiative, and we're able to continue sometimes through 3 or 4 administrations with the city. But it is hard. It is hard once there's like out with the old, in with the new, and their kind of new ideas. Sometimes it takes a full administration, like a cycle, to get back in. The OECD, I work in a little bit of a different an interesting view standpoint because we work at the subnational government level, but around the house, they work mainly at the national level. So sometimes I would say sometimes the national level government impacts what happens at the subnational, of course, and impacts our ability to be able to recruit mayors to this initiative because they're busy, holding down the fort, or they have to think more domestically during this time period because, for whatever reasons, political, not political, financial, they're concentrated more internally. So that's always a little bit, you see the cycles of that, also that trickle down at the subnational level. But so far it's been good. A lot of our mayors do get reelected, so hopefully there's a there's something in the air when mayors decide to take on inclusion as one of their priorities that helps them,
And
sustain them.
I mean, what is a connect? I mean, except for inclusion, is there
Mhm,
any other connecting factor among these mayors that because what we see usually in national and
mhm,
also local administration, and they have been few exceptions, like in London, mainly mainly the political leadership of the country and also local leadership is very much a native non-minority population in every sense. So do you see some inspiring people? I mean, what is it that brings them to you with this? Because you said 40 mayors, so that's not all the entire world,
Right,
right?
right.
So what is that group of population? I mean, what is that group? And I mean, what what makes them different from maybe some other mayors?
Right. So we found that it's particularly mayors who have been vocal and also have been really putting toward actions in inclusion. So, for instance, we have the mayor of Los Angeles that has a climate, if you know Los Angeles, we have a rampant homelessness population that has grown over the years. I think it's maybe one of the top issues in this administration. And we have a mayor that has been trying to build a comprehensive housing strategy that really looks at the root cause of it and tries to address it head on. So that there are some mayors that have really just the nature of the city forces them to take a stand on an issue, and they become kind of not a guiding light, but um, a something that other mayors can relate to. So for some of our cities, they are the only type of city like them in their country. So they're either the biggest cities, so they relate better to cities maybe outside of their country because of the size and the outsized impact that they have on the GDP of the country. Maybe a Stockholm relates better to a New York than a Malmo, in certain instances, and so that also brings them together because they're kind of grappling over the same issues at the same general time. And I have to say, COVID-19 was a great, not a great, I should use my words wisely, was I felt during that period managing this network, it was a unifier in that all the mayors were going through the same thing at the same time, and they were coming. What's this person doing? How are these people grappling with the schools being at distance? How are they getting computers or access to internet for distance learning? How are they putting into place the lockdown? So there was a lot of exchange and cities wanting to exchange with one another in real time. And I think that was apparent, especially during this pandemic. So it's leaders doing like really innovative and sometimes risky, not experimentation. Let's not call it risky, but they're being innovative, which takes a little bit of risk, which takes a little bit of experimentation. We had the former mayor of Stockton, who was the really young guy. I think he was 27 when he took, and he was putting into place a universal basic income, and it was one of the first cities in the U.S. to spearhead this, and now it's popping up in different cities of different sizes across the U.S. So they're kind of ahead of the game, some of the mayors here, and willing to put their neck out to advance, their agendas in some way. And that's what we are gravitating toward, and also bringing them together to share lessons learned, battles won, battles lost, of course, and how to progress. And they're a great group, and we are always trying to keep this dynamic going. And we've worked with cities of all sizes, and that's and also non-OECD cities. So we're getting a lot more cities from Africa, cities from Latin America that are outside of the OECD, and hopefully moving into the Asia Pacific region more as well. The time difference is really hits hard.
Killer, yeah, I know.
Yeah. Managing a network like this.
Yeah, you don't want to go very much east.
Yeah.
ask you, what are some of the greatest achievements of this network that you see? I mean, what is that? What are some things that can inspire others?
Yeah,
Just
so
quickly.
in the beginning, when we started bringing the mayors together, we brought them first twice a year, and but it was such a labor. It was labor intensive, but the connections that they made start to spring up these regional focuses, and actually mayors from it was Medellin, Mexico City, Kyoto, and a few of our Latin American mayors said, actually, we want to kind of be the guiding light for mayors in South America on this topic of inclusion. And they started gathering together on the topic to try and spearhead a movement there. And I feel like that was a big win to bring these mayors together and say, we're so inspired that actually we are going to try and bring up the region of the world where we live and our neighbors in this focus, to focus in on this. I thought was a real win because, of course, our network, like you said, we're only 60 mayors. I mean, we're a team, we're a small team. We're not trying to be 1,000 mayors. We just couldn't manage that. But if it springboards into action, that's what we want. And I think a big win when this launched in 2016, the goal was to make like this inclusive growth kind of a household concept or a name, or to have people talking about it. And I have to say, if that was the goal, it works, because every conference since then has been around inclusive growth or equity. There's always an angle there. And as far as like the communications campaign around it and the building up the kind of global consciousness that we have to pay attention to inequality, and especially in cities, because they are larger in some ways than the national averages. That I feel like was a big win for kind of the field around inclusion and equity. Where I think we have to go now is start to really link up kind of the future, start looking future in the future, and also the intersections, where climate meets, the economic aspects of a city and the inclusion aspects, where the gender, we're talking a lot more about kind of in gender inclusive cities. So, what does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be a migrant woman? What does it mean to be a migrant woman entrepreneur? Like how we start interconnecting and making sure that the policies in cities respond to these people who might be left behind or fall into the gap. So I think generally we have the not silos, but we have the themes, and we know it, and we now need to maybe start connecting them better and talking about how they are connected. Because if we just talk about labor market aspect, we lose the climate angle. If we just talk about education, we lose the infrastructure angle. So we we need to really build out an interconnected system. And then, now it's about resilience. Everyone's talking about resilience and systemic resilience. And I think we need to really start defining what we mean by that, because it's always been attached to climate. And now if we're talking about economic resilience, the residents' resilience, the civil society resilience. I was speaking recently about what happens when a city loses population and or is hit with like a catastrophic event, like let's say in Katrina. Not only do you lose the infrastructure, but you lose a lot of the social infrastructure, the civic society, the people with kind of the historic knowledge. And it's hard to build back when you need something to build on and from. And when everyone goes away and you no longer have this infrastructure that was holding the city together, it takes a long time to build back. And so I think we'll see a lot of how Ukraine handles this. But how do you preserve that? How do you bring it back when places are getting hit, and we'll all, withstand a hit. And then how do you add inclusion into that, making sure that you build in a way that fills in the gaps that were there before. And so
maybe build something completely, or
yeah,
maybe build something new, because what I find usually in
right.
crisis is this: it changes people for
Yes.
better or for worse. So the person who comes back from, even if they went away from the war and they come back changed.
You're right.
So I think, from my perspective, I think that striving to, I think it's maybe more positive to strive to create something new from the experience, because one never loses that kind of
Right.
experience in life. It stays
Right.
there forever. And so the question for me usually is, how do we use that, catastrophic or that experience not as post-traumatic decline, but post-traumatic growth. And what we see through populations, I'm thinking, that went through different kind of crisis, we see that if the society has some sort of tools to integrate that experience and translate it into, oh my goodness, you survived this, therefore you build a muscle, then we can go forward. If it is always you survived this, oh my God, poor you, what happened? This is actually a psychological burden, I think.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe from my point of view, translating hardship into something that is valued as a survival mechanism or skill, maybe gives some kind of new results. Because otherwise, I'm thinking sometimes building back the same might be entangled with grief, because it will never be the same.
Right.
We have to turn tragedy, and it can be also COVID-19. You said COVID-19 connected mayors. Crisis also is a bonding factor, and I found that actually that brought, like, for instance, here in France, where I live right now, it brought people more together. There are less questions of, oh my goodness, where you're from, what is going on. There is more bonding. It's like, we've been in this city locked down together, so we survived something together. And I think that it's always sometimes hard really to see a positive aspect in something that is labeled as crisis, which is in fact crisis. It's a hardship. Kind of went completely in a different direction, but that brought me to another question, which I thought to ask you. So how, from your perspective, you a little bit, kind of touched upon that, but how did COVID-19 and conflict in Ukraine affect your work, right? Maybe personally, like you have to go, as everybody, you had to work remotely. But in terms of inclusion, have you seen, and the network that you're coordinating, have you seen any changes there?
Yes. So there are a few cities that we've worked with, and I get many, of course, are displaying their solidarity and offering refuge for the refugees and displaced persons. But of course, it's also lifting up, like, okay, we need to figure out our housing situation. We haven't been able to, house affordably our current population. Now we have to house temporarily a new population, and I think it's bringing up kind of the same things that were brought up around the pandemic. I'm speaking in particular about the war in Ukraine, and inviting and being able to give the support and give the services and give the housing to Ukrainian people and that are moving into the cities. So I think a lot of cities are trying to grapple with that. But for the COVID-19, I think a lot of the discussion when we brought cities together right after. So this was in May 2021 at our fifth meeting of champion mayors. A lot was on this youth, like how to figure out how to keep the youth civically engaged and do it better, how to support them in their economic development and how to provide the services that they need. And I was surprised to see, not surprised, the mayors are great, but they'd really honed in on this topic of supporting youth and realizing that maybe and in the aftermath of trying to deal with COVID, that they were disproportionately impacted. So, for instance, Paris built, and this was happening before, this Maison de la Jeunesse, and there are a lot of Scandinavian cities that have this one-stop shop for young people where you can get counseling, but also career advice, but also a place to just hang out without having to pay. A lot of people don't talk about it, but a lot of the youth are economically challenged. I mean, just as a population in a whole, they don't have a job.
That's true. Maybe some sort of a loan.
Exactly.
Or having studied.
Yeah. So just and a lot of spaces you have to pay to play, right? Cafes, restaurants, and so just providing a space. Can you imagine a space for people to hang out? But I have to, for COVID-19, what I have found was that there's a lot more talk about resilience and being resilient and how to survive shocks and how to recover in ways that bring you back to, not back, but better. And what have we learned and how can we be better? But there's also a lot of I would say a lot feels like it's changing around the urban paradigm. Is teleworking going to be permanent? Is it a blip? Is it, what do we do with these office spaces that are not occupied, half the time? And in New York, for instance, I think they got approved on to try and turn commercial office space into housing, but they're running up to issues with the land use. And so that has blocked it completely.
Right?
The zoning, yeah. And so even if you want to make changes that kind of adapt to these new urban paradigms, some of the foundational laws and how cities are zoned and how land is used needs to be rethought of completely. And there's a little bit of wait and see if this is permanent, if this is a temporary reaction to what hopefully is a temporary situation, or if it's a permanent change to kind of what we've learned from COVID and then kind of this other crisis. And I think there will be a balancing act. What I've seen a lot more is agile policymaking, which is very interesting. Not interesting, interesting as in, wow, you can lock down today and then be open tomorrow and put a mask mandate up today and no mask tomorrow. And there's this, where we used to have our relationship with the cities maybe in chunks of years, like, a housing policy is a year long or things like that. Now it's more instantaneous. We're using data and have access to data on like number of infected people daily. And there are a lot of data hubs that were at the outgrowth of COVID-19 and sharing the technology among cities. And so there is kind of a new speed into local policy making, and that has come as an output. There's a new sense of communication between, I feel like, City Hall and residents, either through Twitter, or some people had YouTube pages, or,
Podcast.
podcast. So there are a number of ways that I think the relationships, or at least are trying to be built between City Hall and citizens. And we're working out the kinks, but I think it'll be an interesting new relationship that we form with cities. And I think now there's a general consciousness of what a city is in charge of for us, and what role they played in keeping us safe, and the rules that they can make, and what it means to be a resident in this community that we've created. And I think it's a little bit of wait to see, but it's also a little bit of like, let's plan, and let's try and steer the direction and the way we want it to go. And hopefully we'll be seeing a lot of more action in the next few years. We're also 8 years from the SDGs. I mean, there are a lot of things coming up. The 2030 agenda, around climate, around SDGs, around things. So I think it's go time.
Right now is a go time.
It's a go time. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I just want to ask you, because you were talking about many things that are going on, and then I didn't actually get the chance to ask you what perspective, what additional perspective, you lived in different countries, you studied in different countries. What kind of how did that impact your kind of dedication to this work, and what is additional thing that you bring to the table in comparison to people who didn't have as exciting life as a fellow, my fellow, global traveler.
Yeah. That is an interesting question. I don't know if I've ever thought of it in that way. What have I brought into this role that's a little different? Well, I have no idea, first off, but just being,
this is what qualitative interviews
right,
do for you.
Right, to try and pinpoint it. Yeah, I've lived in cities with great public transportation, and cities with not so great public transportation, and cities that provide early childhood, like childcare, and cities that don't.
Or countries, right? Sometimes you can't escape the national system.
And cities that are really fun, and cities that are a little less fun. And
no, I can say it on my side. I have lived in the city of nerds.
Oh, where's that?
That's how we were. Microsoft and Intel labs are located there. It's called Haifa. Yeah. So if you're a boring, if you're a boring person, just want to study and work, about 12 hours a day, that's where you should be. There is a sea, but nobody knows that it's there because it's they're in the office, so they never visit. And they actually sometimes have a view on the sea as well. Yeah. Microsoft, I think, really has it, or Intel, both of them. Yeah, go for it. So,
so I think I know. I have a feeling of what makes a city work, right? For me, at least. And I try to create it everywhere I go. I don't like sitting in traffic, which I've done all my life in Los Angeles, growing up in Los Angeles. So I moved to a city that had a little bit of public transportation. So,
Paris,
Paris, right. And New York before that. And so there are just some aspects that I feel, a lot of it is sharing and exchanging and knowing what I like. I love cities, and I'd rather live in a shoebox in a city than like a mansion, by myself in a rural area. But what I I keep a lot of stories and about cities and how people have lived in them, and a lot of this exchange and innovation it's a story and narrative telling. And so maybe I bring that, my own personal story, but also kind of the stories of how the mayors or people who have lived in the cities and my friends who still live in the cities, that I can ask, what's working, what's happening here? Did you know the mayor was doing this? In cities that I've worked with, and people still live. So maybe it's just having a connection to places, to different places, and a sense of um, um, attachment. And
Mm.
maybe that's it. But
Yeah, that's quite funny, interesting to see the sense of attachment to different places, because we don't talk about that you can love, you don't necessarily need to, what the question where you're from, I find it very confining when you've lived in several countries, because you're thinking, how can I choose one? Because I lived in so many, I have friends in them. I don't know how you feel about that. Is that,
yeah,
kind
it's
of that,
hard. Yes.
yeah, is it kind of like you feel like pieces of your heart are not really like in your village, there
Yes.
are just, like network around the world, like
Yes.
you're just everywhere.
Yes.
And it's like
Yeah, no, absolutely. And my parents don't live in the city or the place where they grew up. And so there's always been this kind of, I'm here, but I've, roots in other places. And I don't think you necessarily have to live. There's some cities I've visited that I've felt like really good about and want to return to. And, you just get a good feeling and sense of the people and how they live and how life is. Of course, you're on vacation, so it's a little different. You don't have to deal with the wear and tear of the city or a place.
administration.
Exactly. But sometimes you get a good feeling. Like I really like London. I've never lived there, but
I lived in London, I love
Yes.
it, I miss it every day.
Okay, so I had a good feeling, and I've been there like several times. And every time I leave, I'm like, I think I could live in this place. Like there's something about it. So sometimes you just get a good feeling. But I think just loving cities is what I bring to, and I want other people to love cities and other people to do well when they're living in cities. And maybe it's as simple as that.
Mm. If there was one last thing that you would like to share with our listeners and viewers, what would it be? Like, what is your last message?
Ooh.
What is the message?
The message. I think there is a need for kind of a collective effort to start thinking about the role we play in how cities, or what we demand from our cities, in particular, how equitable they are. Like if you are in a place of privilege and live in a great neighborhood and access, but the whole city is not like that, I'd like us, you to spend a little time thinking about what you can, demand from your local government or your regional government, and how to kind of spread the wealth, because a city that functions well is a city where everyone has access and lives in a great neighborhood and is fulfilled by where they live and sleep. And I mean, no one wants to be homeless, right? And no one, um, there's a sense of uh, it's really hard to enjoy your city if you see so many people struggling. And so I'd challenge people to think about the roles that they can play in helping secure a better life for everyone, especially if you're in a position of privilege. So.
Thank you very much, Sena Segbedzi. Thank you so much for this interview. It was a pleasure to speak with you. I learned so much from you and from your perspective. So thanks so much for having the time and giving us your time.
Thank you, Orna. I'm so glad we bumped into each other this year. It was a highlight of the year, and we were able to come together and speak about our mutual love for cities. Yeah.
You were listening to the podcast Inclusive Urban Futures with Ona Rosenfeld. Please stay tuned for the next episode.